Attending our webinar today. The webinar is entitled Filling the Gaps with Early Childhood STEM. And to give you some background about us at the Honeybee Company, what we do is we offer a line of children's products and resources that help educators introduce concepts in science, technology, engineering, and math to kids 6 and under. And the name of, and we do so through the use of these two really cute characters, Paige and Paxton. Oops. There they go. They just can't get enough of jumping up and down. So, and today we have Danielle Taylor, who has a master's in education policy and who is an analyst at Abt Associates. She has a mix of experience within the classroom and a combination of research and policy background. So what Danielle's really going to focus on is around the current movement in policies and challenges regarding STEM implementation and curriculum at the early childhood level. And she'll also give you guys some insights that classroom educators can use with their students, even if there is an absence of STEM curriculum in the school or district. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it up to Danielle, and we can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Kelly, for that lovely introduction. And I want to thank you all for joining this webinar, and I look forward to having discussion and answering any questions that you have at the end of my little spiel. So to start off, I am going to give you a little bit about my background, but I wanted to first just talk about a few data points that I found very interesting when it came to STEM education. So I'm going to discuss my experience as a preschool teacher and also now studying research when it comes to all fields of work between K and 12 and post-secondary work, and also about a few of the policy that I studied when I was getting my master's. So the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, which does annual and biannual progress reports, found that in 2011, fewer than half of 4th, 8th, and 12th grade students scored proficient in science in 2011. And in 2013, only 30% of high school graduates who completed the ACT college entrance exam were ready for their first year in college science courses. And so for me, the questions come up to be, what are the implications for these high school students who are not prepared to enter in their college courses? Does that mean that students are not majoring into STEM coursework? Are they taking longer to graduate? Are they just all of a sudden changing their major into something they're more comfortable with? And I think there are huge repercussions, implications to this, and also particularly because our nation's future when it comes to the STEM workforce needs a sufficient supply of high school graduates prepared for college and for postgraduate training in STEM courses and careers. And these STEM occupations require a workforce with competencies targeted by robust education in STEM, including the ability to generate questions, to apply problem-solving skills to novel situations, to draw inferences from written material, and to communicate a persuasive argument. And so for me, having students prepared for college work can very much impact the careers they choose and the STEM careers they choose. And I think if we start very early with young children, it could definitely impact the academic career of our students. So I went to Wellesley College, which is a school right outside of Boston, and when I went there, I majored in psychology. And the moment I took my first psych class when I was at Wellesley, I definitely fell head over heels in love with that department and that field of study. I particularly fell in love with trying to find out how children develop, particularly in the first few years of their lives. I love doing research. I love gathering data and answering questions, but I also felt that I had a huge tie to teaching. I come from a family of teachers. I was able to tutor a lot when I was in high school and teach some small groups, but at the time I didn't really know how to balance being hands-on in the classroom, but also wanting to do research. I was given the opportunity to do an internship the summer before my senior year, and I was able to teach a high school course and also be in a nursery school when I was in Kampala, the capital of Uganda. For a month, I taught a bio class to ninth and 10th grade students, which was a surprise not only to myself, but probably to my students, since I was not a teacher initially. But with the head teacher, I was able to build a curriculum that I felt comfortable teaching my students. And while I was there, I had students in my classroom who grasped the concepts very easily, but the majority of my students took a lot more time to process and to really get what I was trying to teach them when it came to bio. And after a month there, which is only my small subset, my small view in teaching high school students, I went to the nursery school program where I spent a little over a month helping out with that classroom of young children who were 4 years old. And what I saw in the classroom was a lot of math and literacy, which is common to be present with K through 12 academia. But what I also noticed was the absence of a lot more STEM coursework, a lot more STEM activities. So there's very few technology components to it, not that much engineering, and some science. And what really struck me at the time, although I went into this internship wanting to see if I wanted to be a teacher, but what also struck me was the research component. The skill sets that I had there, I started to question what would happen if we actually had those children exposed to some concepts. The children at that particular school stay in the school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and knowing that my students who struggled a little bit in my bio class when they're in 9th and 10th grade, what difference would that have made later on if they had actually had exposure to more STEM concepts? I recently just finished my master's in education policy. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and there I studied policy all the way ranging from kindergarten policy to all the way through high school and elementary and secondary school and some post-secondary work. I ended up doing my thesis in Head Start, which is a federally funded program that is one of the biggest federally funded programs in the United States. And they're preschools throughout the United States that children and families use. The children and families that go to Head Start are families that are at or below the poverty line, and it's free for their students, and it really helps. There have been studies that show that the students' exposure to this 1 year, where they're 4 years old, and there are some programs that actually do a two-year program, and they start from 3rd grade to 4th grade, and in this program they are able to ready themselves for kindergarten. And I believe, and still believe when I was writing my thesis, that preschools should be accessible, available, and at times necessary for all children, not just children in that socioeconomic strata, but children outside of that should have a lot of exposure to preschool, not just in the social context, but also when it comes to academics and their exposure to math and literacy, but also to STEM concepts to help ready them for kindergarten, which actually can very much impact the rest of their academic career throughout high school, and also if they choose to enter in a career that really focuses on STEM concepts. And I know that personally because I was a preschool teacher for 2 years. I taught at a Child Study Center, which is a preschool that was on the Wellesley campus, and this preschool was one of the first preschools that had an observation booth. So parents, students, and researchers can go and watch children interact with their peers interact with adults, and most importantly, interact with their environment. I taught the 2-year-old classroom. The center had a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old classroom. I had 12 students. I'm going to call my children students from now on. And I saw what introducing some STEM concepts can really do for my classroom. So for example, I had one year when a lot of my children were very interested into space. And so for 2 weeks, my classroom transformed into this space topic themed classroom. So for example, in the Play-Doh section, we had little figurines that they can use to manipulate the dough. I had stars and planet sponges at our paint section so they can create a painting and then bring it home or give it to a friend. In our block section, students could build structures and engineer structures in that area of the classroom. We had a role-playing section where children can really build on their imagination and go into outer space and feel like they're astronauts. And I also had books that dealt with that theme. I also had curriculum and material for students who weren't interested in space, but what I found very fascinating while I was in that classroom was seeing students who already had exposure and interest in space, the students who did not have exposure or interest into space, but see that their best friend were very much into building the structure and they would help their friend and then spark that interest. And even the students that weren't interested in space at all, what was most important to me as a teacher is to expose them to that. So they could do their own thing in the classroom, but they were able to be exposed to those concepts so that later on down the road, they had some familiarity with that science theme that we had in our classroom for 2 weeks. And I felt that that exposure is very much important, but also I really realized as a new teacher the absence of a lot of STEM curricula that I could have for my children that were age appropriate for those kids. And I feel that Rachel and Kelly are very much building that material for not just for new teachers and veteran teachers, but also for parents. I feel that it's very important to have these concepts that are easily digestible for adults who can then help their child really spark an interest and delve into different STEM fields. And although it's easy enough to do science concepts and some math concepts, what I found challenging the most was introducing technology into my students that were appropriate, that the parents felt comfortable with, and also just different engineering concepts. And I feel like this material will be very, very much beneficial for students down in the long run for their academic career. Now I work at Abt Associates, which Kelly mentioned before. It's a social research policy consulting firm, and the firm does everything to study research when it comes to welfare, to housing, to food and nutrition, and also the environment, and I work in their education department. So a lot of my work can range from anything from early childhood development in preschool all the way to elementary school, high school, and even college. For instance, I'm working on a project that works with college readiness programs, and so programs that are introduced in middle school and high school, and a lot of the students in these programs get help in deciding what coursework to take throughout middle school and high school to ready them for college, how to prepare for standardized tests like the ACTs and SATs, and also what to do and how to search for colleges that are a good fit for them. So for my work, I am studying a lot of these programs to figure out, are we providing the best resources for our students to help them pick the best college that's the best fit for them, and to hopefully that they will persist and graduate from the universities. And a lot of the feedback that I hear from a lot of the directors who are in charge of this program or these programs are that a lot of students either show little interest in STEM coursework, or maybe they do, but they don't feel like the students are as prepared as they can be. And I can't help but to think if we were able to have accessible, affordable preschool, if not free preschool for students, to start them from very, very early on what impact that would have for their students later on down the road, and also to have materials for students, teachers, and for parents to help really spark that interest so that it could lay down the foundation for STEM, so that hopefully these students are able to build on to that. So by the time they're in middle school and high school, they're prepared for that coursework in college. And like I say, now with that data point that I said at the beginning of the talk by the NAEP, that less than half of our students are proficient in science, and only 36% of our high school students are able to feel or prepared to take first year college course. And I feel that's something that we should all be very concerned with, and really try to figure out different strategies to help these students and maybe start them a lot earlier and help ready them so when they are in kindergarten, maybe there's a little bit more trajectory to help them down the road. And so I definitely, in my work right now, use my exposure being in the classroom as a teacher when I was teaching preschool, and also in that high school class that I was there for a month, and also my policy research that I did my master's program, that now I have a broad knowledge of policy and how that affected how I taught in the classroom, and why I did certain things and why I can't do certain things when I was in my master's program. And now as a researcher, I'm hopefully able to change a lot of policy that right now could be ineffective to our children, and help students and teachers really strategize in a way to help fill those spots in careers that really, really, really need individuals who are knowledgeable and experts in the STEM field. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for listening. If there are any questions, please let me know. I'll have Kelly read those.
Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, just go ahead and submit them in the questions box, and we'll go ahead and have Danielle answer your questions. Okay, Danielle, we have a question. So what are some of the things that classroom educators can do if they don't have a strong background in science or math or engineering? What can they do to feel more comfortable with introducing those concepts earlier?
I think that's a great question, because I definitely personally experienced that when I was teaching bio, and also when I was a preschool teacher. The resources that I definitely leaned on was my co-teachers. So I worked with teachers that were veteran teachers in the field for decades, and I really asked them what resources that they use in order to implement STEM concepts into the classroom, because I'm personally not an engineer, and I feel like I'm technologically savvy, but there are a lot of concepts that I felt that I didn't have the experience to really firsthand just develop a curriculum from my own personal experience. So I feel that other teachers are definitely very much a great resource to ask them about what they use, what they introduce in their classroom, so that you can change that in order to fit your students' needs. Also, something as basic as going online to see what other curriculum is online that's available to you. I know the Department of Education, if you go to their website, they have some resources that you can use. Hold on, let me look up another one. The National, if you Google the National Assessment of Educational Progress, they have links to other resources that you can use as a STEM teacher. But I feel that using teachers to help, get their experience in order to implement those concepts that you're not as familiar with in the classroom would be a great resource to go online. And also use Kelly's and Rachel's books. I feel there's material right now that are quickly being developed to help introduce STEM curricula for young children that's developmentally appropriate for them.
And we have another question from John. He asked, what are some activities that you provided to engage parents in STEM education?
Oh, can you repeat the question, Kelly? Sorry, you cut off.
Apologies. The question is, what are some activities that you provided to engage parents in STEM education?
So at the school that I taught in, they had some workbooks that I personally copied pages out of and handed parents. So if we had a section about nature, I would find a few of the books that I would actually lend to my parents. So I think that's a good resource if you have any texts or books that you can lend or check out to parents, because they could use it to also read themselves and also read with their child. If you have a student that's very much into one particular book, why not send it to them for a day or two overnight so that the parent and the child can connect and read that particular resource. And I would copy pages out of a few like basic curriculum books that we had to give parents after, and sometimes even before a section that I would introduce in my classroom, just to make sure that they were familiar with what was happening, and if their children came home with questions that they were able to ask, and if not, they can write down those questions and come in the classroom and I can discuss it with them or with their child that in the classroom with all my students that day. Those were some resources that I was able to give to parents, and I'm sure there are a bunch more who are a little bit more creative, but those are things that I personally used to help parents out or to share with parents during my tenure.
All right, so we have another question. What are your suggestions based on your work at APP to get elected officials to commit more resources to universal pre-K?
That's a great question. I think particularly now, like for Head Start, since it's one of the largest federally funded programs in the United States, and considering we're going through a lot of economic strife, there's a lot of discussion about cutting that program and or limiting its budget, which I think can have a devastating impact on that program, particularly for the students that attend Head Start and for the families that really need it as a resource to help their children. I think for my work right now, we're very much tied to what issue our client needs, and we're very transparent and very clear about some policy that doesn't work. And so we produce many memos that a lot of congressmen could use in order to inform them more about policy. And also a lot of our work goes directly to the White House. And so for people who are in certain fields that deal with the college readiness piece, we're able to have memos for them to inform them, which will hopefully in turn change policy so that they are more informed about what's working and what's impactful and what isn't working, and that could definitely be changed. And it's very important that we try to be very clear that even though our client may want one answer, that we're going to give them balanced, well-informed work, that although they may want one outcome, if that outcome is not working, we tell them it's not working in a nicer way, but also give suggestions on what we found in other research or in other literature that could be probably a little bit more effective. And then that's definitely used when it comes to inform policy in the future. And hopefully in the long run, that would be something that will help change things that aren't working and that are working in the classroom right now for teachers and for students.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Okay, I think that it looks like there are no more questions for today. Want to go ahead and thank Danielle for being our guest to our webinar. If you guys do have any questions following the webinar, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can also always forward your questions over to Danielle if you have any other questions. So my contact information is Kelley, Kelley, at HONEYBCO.com. And if you, again, reach out to me if you have any other questions, and we will continue to do these webinars at least once a month. So please stay tuned to some of our upcoming webinars in the future months. Thanks again and have a great day.